Looking back into 2006, 2005, mine was kind of the idyllic family. I had 4 children at the time. My wife, we had tried for many years to have a 5th child, and at the time of the accident, she was about 5 months pregnant, and so we finally had a success. We had miscarriages and other issues that were very devastating to go through, but it was an incredibly happy time for my family. I had the unfortunate experience of being awake immediately after the crash. And by immediate, I mean I could still hear the glass falling around the car when I came to and realized what had happened. But as soon as I was able to get some motion in my body and be able to, where I could move my hand, I turned it off, and that's where I was able to then, after some struggle, see that my wife was not moving in her seat, as she kind of was cuddled in the fetal position in the passenger seat. With her, I was able to check for a pulse, which there wasn't any, and I was able to see the last breath leave her body. After some additional struggle, I was able to turn and see into the back seat, and my son Benjamin had a significant wound on his head that once again wasn't bleeding. And anyone who's had even a slightest head injury knows that they bleed a lot. And so I just, in my heart, knew and thought and sensed that the same fate had befallen him as well. My daughter, who was seated in the middle in the back seat, was basically lifeless. Her head was tilted forward and her hair was draped over her face. But she wasn't moving. I didn't know, and it had no way to check whether she was alive, but I just sensed that she was gone as well. I didn't know anything about my son Sam, and oddly enough didn't feel to even be concerned until when I was being extricated from the car, I heard him cry out. And that was something I hung on to in my drive up to the emergency room. You know, I was able to see the car that had hit us before I was taken out of the vehicle. It was on its roof about 40, 50 feet up from up the road. But, you know, unfortunately, the teenage drunk driver who was driving that vehicle didn't come back to render assistance. In fact, he knew he had hit somebody and walked away from the accident. And so that was, I think, had an impact on me as well about, you know, the mind of one who's in that or puts himself into that situation to not only drink but to kind of selfishly endanger the lives of others, and that selfishness carries on beyond the accident. I was in an ICU. I kind of excused myself against the doctor's wishes out of the ICU because I wanted to be with Sam so desperately, and also with my son Michael, that I walked from the University Medical Center over to Primary Children's where they had Sam, and he was completely sedated, and they were monitoring his cranial pressure. When he was released 10 days after, we took him home, and I still had not told him anything about the accident, and I laid him in my bed, actually. And it was then that he finally looked up and he said, "Where's Mom?" And that's when I told him that we had been involved in a crash, and that his mother and his brother and his sister were dead. And, you know, it was a state of shock for him, immediate shock. And, you know, it took a long time for him to finally really understand the impact of what had happened to our family. Only because frequently he would just kind of come to me like it was a dream. You know, there were times I could feel him grabbing onto me, wondering if this was just a bad dream and if I was going to suddenly disappear. I think he still struggles a lot with that, in that, you know, I can't travel very far without a phone call. And it's just, you know, am I still there? Am I still alive? Am I still part of his life? And so he struggles with that significantly, wondering what he can count on going forward. Quite frankly, I struggle with that too. This drunken teenage driver who had hit us was actually at an ice cream play establishment very close to our home. And he was there with his teenage friends. And not only had he been drinking, but he had been drinking for some time. He was kind of a hardened alcoholic. But his friends knew that he was this type of a drinker. And not only did they know it, but they knew that he would drink and drive. And on this particular night, he was with quite a few friends. And he was there, and he wanted to leave his friends with his girlfriend. He wanted his girlfriend to come with them, and they wanted to head off. And so he actually took her and got her into the car. But her friends pulled her out of the car, thinking that she could get hurt with he in that state. But they didn't take the keys. They didn't stop him from driving. And so in their mind, it was almost like, well, if that's what he wants, if he's going to pursue this, then, it's his own choice, and the consequence will just be his. And if he gets in an accident, it's, too bad for him. At some point, you've got to decide that given that situation, you'll be the one to step in and take the keys. You'll be the one to step in and at least volunteer to drive. You'll be the one to just go in and at least take that person out of the driver's seat. You might have gotten away with it once, twice, God forbid 5 times, who knows how many times. But it's going to catch up with you. And you'll be in a situation where you will look around and those lives will be gone. And it'll be because of you. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I wouldn't wish to hang that on anyone's neck. And yet it goes on all too frequently. People thinking that they're above it or that it won't ever happen to them, especially when they've been drinking. I'm here to tell you that it does, because it's happened to me in my life, in my family. The deaths mount up. That's not a place where you want to be, especially when it is so preventable.